Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise tonight to speak in support of the legislation introduced as part of the Newman government's criminal motorcycle gang reforms. Our government's response to this issue has been unprecedented and sends a very clear, strong message to all those associated with criminal gangs and motorcycle gangs. On behalf of my constituents, I congratulate the Premier and the Attorney-General on their commitment to the safety of Queenslanders and their commitment to the promise we made as a government 18 months ago to get tough on crime in this state. Earlier this evening, we heard the Leader of the Opposition's attempt to compare our government's dealings with criminal gangs to our youth justice boot camps. The member for Inala said we can't even hold 2 kids in a boot camp, as if that was some credible basis for attacking our proposals for dealing with serious criminal activities. Clearly, the Leader of the Opposition has no idea about the difference between dealing with young people, many of whom have come from significantly disadvantaged backgrounds, and the difference between them and serious organised criminals. Madam Speaker, as a father of 4 sons, I understand only too well the delicacies and intricacies of raising boys. It's challenging for any parent in this complicated, fast-paced modern world of ours. For the Leader of the Opposition to suggest there is even a remote similarity between youth justice and dealing with serious crime is not only delusional but simply appalling. Youth justice is about working with young people, providing programs to help change their thinking, supporting those who are receptive with mentors, giving them hope and helping them to develop new patterns of thinking, and fundamentally keeping them out of jail. There is no similarity, there is no comparison between how we should deal with badly behaved young people and how we should deal with serious criminals and organised crime. The former government, the government which the member for Inala served in as both a member and a minister, was soft on financial management, soft on economic reform and soft on crime. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Gold Coast has had enough of this issue. We've had enough of the escalating violence and we've had enough of the intimidation and scaremongering. The Gold Coast's reputation is being tarnished by a lawless minority, and it's time to put a stop to this madness. Tonight we've heard from the member for Nicklin and the member from Gaven and the member for Condamine, who have all gone to great lengths to talk about how we're rushing this through, how we have no respect for the process, and that it's inappropriate to be pushing these reforms through. Well, can I say, as someone who's sat on the end of a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning and received threats from someone who said, "I know where you live, I know where your kids go to school, and I'm coming after you," it's no comfort to me, and it's certainly no comfort to the families of the Gold Coast that we go slow on this issue. And it was only thanks to the quick action of the Broadbeach Police at that time, back in 2007, that they were able to trace that call, and on that occasion the perpetrator was actually caught and dealt with. But it's not a great experience for a father of young boys to hear that sort of threat made over the telephone, and so as far as I'm concerned, these reforms and these laws and this action by this government can't come fast enough. The legislation introduced today by the Attorney-General is unlike any that we've seen in Australia. This is not a short-term fix. It is a long-term solution to ridding our society of these groups. We will make the changes the former government did not when the criminal motorcycle gangs began seizing power in Queensland. Mr Deputy Speaker, a senior Gold Coast policeman approached me at Ashmore City last Saturday morning. He spoke to me about the government's response to this issue and how he and other officers were motivated by the Premier's statements in the aftermath of the Broadbeach incident. He actually asked me to pass on his congratulations and thanks to the Premier, the Police Minister and the Attorney-General for their swift action and their strong stance. He said that our government's support for the officers on the front line dealing with the violence and criminal activity linked to these motorcycle gangs has been especially empowering and encouraging. In fact, he said that the recent statements of the Premier and the Attorney-General had actually inspired many officers who for some time had become quite depressed and despondent about the lack of action from the previous government when some of these matters arose a number of years ago. The former government dropped the ball on these issues. These tough new laws signal a fresh approach. Our government has had enough. I want to congratulate the Attorney-General on these and the many other reforms we've already seen in our term of government in respect of sex offenders, child protection, drug offences and the proceeds of criminal activity. The most recent response from Gold Coast Police has been absolutely outstanding, and it's very pleasing to see that Jim Keogh is back on the coast. He was fantastic in his previous role, and his return has restored a great deal of confidence, and I know that the public can rest assured knowing that the fight against these gangs is being led by someone as experienced as Superintendent Jim Keogh. Since being elected to represent the people of Southport, I've developed a very close relationship with the Southport Police Station, the officer in charge there, Ray Vine, and the District Officer, Paul Zebath. And they've done a fantastic job of keeping the Southport community safe and calm during the last few weeks, when media interest has created an increased sense of fear and intimidation. I must remind the House this evening that the officer in charge, Ray Vine, is the first permanent appointment at Southport after many years of temporary appointments by the previous government. And again, I must pass on my thanks to Minister Dempsey and the Commissioner for giving one of Queensland's busiest police stations a permanent person in charge and for treating the team on the ground and the community with respect, unlike the opposition who fiddle-faddled over these staff appointments in the past, just like they fiddle-faddled over the serious crime on the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is, however, by and large, a fairly safe place to live, thanks to the wonderful services of our frontline police. It's always been known as a great place for families, and since elected as a member for Southport, I've made the safety of our community a top priority.
Didn't Paul Wilson start some great work there?
Absolutely, he did. He did. I take that interjection. Criminal activity, however, linked to motorcycle gangs cannot be tolerated. We're looking at tougher laws, on top of those we've already put in place. The Vicious Lawless Association Disestablishment Bill will see members of criminal organisations receive severe punishments for committing serious offences. The bill will deter individuals from participating in these criminal organisations, encourage those involved in these organisations to cooperate with the law and, most importantly, break the morale of members of criminal motorcycle gangs. The regime will apply to a person who commits an offence while participating in the affairs of an association. Such an offender will be considered a vicious, lawless associate and subject to extra punishment beyond that which would normally apply for the offence. A further 15 years added to their sentence. If the associate was at the time of the offence a leader in the group, they will also receive an additional 10 years on top of the 15 years imprisonment, and all of that on top of the original sentence. Mr Deputy Speaker, we're not stopping there. If the offence was violent, a further 10 years imprisonment will be added to their sentence. This bill makes it clear that extra punishment is mandatory and cannot be reduced by the court. And I, for one, am pleased to see that these measures are being put in place. I think all of us are fed up with hearing of many occasions where the judiciary has let down the people of Queensland, where serious offenders have been let off on short terms or suspended sentences, or been let out far too early on parole, and to such a large extent have begun to make a mockery of the system. The Vicious Lawless Association Disestablishment Bill is the first of its kind in Australia and will see the Gold Coast and Queensland become a safer place for families and visitors. Mr Deputy Speaker, many of my constituents might be surprised to learn that an estimated 80% of tattoo parlours in Queensland are run by criminal motorcycle gangs. Phase 1 of the Tattoo Parlours Bill introduces a licensing regime for body art tattoo parlours and tattooists. The bill will see members of criminal organisations banned for owning, operating or working in these parlours, ensuring only fit and proper persons are able to hold licences. The Act will also amend legislation to prohibit criminal motorcycle gang members from wearing club colours inside licensed venues. Licence applications will start being received from the 1st of January. Compliance with unlicensed trading will start from the 1st of July next year. Prohibition criminal motorcycle gang members wearing club colours will commence on assent of this bill. Mr Deputy Speaker, we're wasting no time in the effort to put an end to this nonsense. Phase 2 will see the Criminal Organisation Act of 2009 amended so that many other licences may be refused to individuals who the Queensland Police Service advises are members of criminal motorcycle gangs. This bill will make it very difficult for members of criminal motorcycle gangs to do business in our community, and I think that's a good thing. The Criminal Code will be amended with the insertion of a number of new offences and the creation of new circumstances of aggravation for existing offences. These amendments will target those involved in criminal organisations to help clean up the streets of the Gold Coast. A criminal organisation is already defined in Section 1 of the Criminal Code to mean, firstly, an organisation of 3 or more people who predominantly gather for the purpose of engaging in serious criminal activity and who present as a risk to the safety, welfare and order of the community. Secondly, it is defined as an organisation declared under the Criminal Organisation Act. Additionally, it is proposed that another arm be added to this definition to include criminal organisations that are prescribed by regulation. These new offences will be added to the Criminal Code that will incur a maximum of 3 years imprisonment and mandatory minimum 6 months imprisonment, as well as confiscation and crushing of any vehicle used before, during or after the offence. The offences include knowingly gathering in groups of 3 or more members in a public place, going to banned locations such as clubhouses, as prescribed by legislation, and or promoting or recruiting for the organisation. The current maximum penalty for a fray is 1 year, which under these amendments will be increased to 7 years. Furthermore, a mandatory 1-year imprisonment will apply for serious assaults on police if committed by members of criminal motorcycle gangs. Mandatory disqualification of drivers' licences for 3 months for criminal motorcycle gangs will also apply. There will also be changes to the Bail Act regarding any offence, and this is an important reform. These will include presumption against bail for criminal motorcycle gang members, as well as mandatory passport surrender as a condition of bail. Amendments will also see additional powers given to the CMC. This will make it an offence to withhold evidence from the CMC, even if you fear retribution and are a member or an associate of a criminal motorcycle gang. There will also be mandatory imprisonment for first contempt offences, 2.5 years for second offences and 5 years for third offences. Mr Deputy Speaker, this legislation is groundbreaking. We will take away their money, we will take away their bikes, we will take away their assets, we will stop them gathering groups, we will stop them from recruiting new members, and Mr Deputy Speaker, we will put these criminals in jail where they belong. When I ran for Parliament, I heard from many people in Ashmore, Southport and Parkwood and other parts of the electorate, particularly elderly people, just how concerned they were for their own safety. Gang violence, drug dealers disputes, break and enter offences had dominated our local news bulletins for far too long. But this is not just about my local community, this is about our city's image. This is about our tourism and development industries. This is about jobs and opportunity. Queensland and the Gold Coast do not need the negative publicity generated by the kind of behaviours we saw in Broadbeach recently. This is not the image we want potential visitors to see of the Gold Coast on their TV screens in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth. We don't want them changing their holiday plans. We don't want them worrying about the safety of their families. There are so many great things happening right now on the Gold Coast and in Southport, it would be a shame to undo all the good work that has occurred in the 18 months since this government came to power. And so it's important we send the right message interstate and overseas. And that's why I cannot commend the Premier enough for the strong message that he's sending to Queenslanders and our nation through these legislative changes. Next year, our state will host the G20 and the Pan Pacs, and in just a few years' time the Commonwealth Games will place the Gold Coast and Queensland on the world stage. It is just so fundamentally important that we undertake these measures and do everything we can, not only to clean up our image, but to make our streets and our cities safer. This issue is threatening a secure future for our families and our state. It's threatening a secure future for our city, and it needs to be addressed. I'm pleased to stand here tonight as a proud member of this government in support of the Premier, the Attorney-General and our police member in support of this legislation.